To close out this fantastic day, I would like to introduce Dr. Joe Mitchell, President and CEO of Franciscan Children's. Franciscan Children is a specialty pediatric hospital in Boston that provides a range of behavioral health care, post-acute, and rehabilitation care and special education services. For anyone who has ever been to its campus, you know how special of a place Franciscan's Children is. Dr. Mitchell will provide the closing remarks for the Children's Behavioral Health Summit. Dr. Mitchell.
Oh, thank you very much. I have the enviable task of ending the day, and I know I stand before you in a beautiful fall weekend after a long day, a long and what I might add is an inspiring day. I'm very grateful to be here today, and I'd like to start with some thank yous. First, thanks to MHA and our colleagues at Boston Children's, Steve Walsh, Kevin Churchwell, each of our respective teams for their dedication and commitment. These two organizations have really been, I think, champions for healthcare for children, but in particular have been at the forefront of this important issue around pediatric mental health, so thank you. I'd like to thank the staff that put this together, Lee and Amara and others. I know a lot of work goes into a day like this, and I've sat through hundreds of these kinds of days, and this is one of the best we've had. And thank you, Jackie, for your stewardship throughout the day and keeping us on time. Let's give you a round of applause. We've really had a wonderful group of speakers. I think a very rich dialogue today, and it's palpable in the room that there's a kind of urgency here and a commitment to try to help solve this issue, which I'm going to argue is really one of the fundamental issues of our day, maybe the defining issue of our day. I'm going to do three things. One is I'm going to just step back for a minute and try to put this challenge we're facing into context. I'm going to step back for a minute. Second is I'm going to recap some of the themes that we've heard today, a bit of a call to action, to be honest with you, so we all leave here on a high note. And then finally, talk a little bit about the path forward, and I'll talk briefly about my organization's affiliation with Boston Children's. Just a word about Franciscan Children's. We've been in the business of caring for children with complex behavioral health and medical needs for over 70 years. We're very proud of our tradition and history, which is a very Boston tradition. We were founded originally by John F. Kennedy's parents, Joe and Rose Kennedy. They had a child with special needs and provided funding in 1949 for our mission, which has been carried on through the Archdiocese and with the Franciscan Missionaries of Mary. And since our founding, we've played a vital role in the pediatric care delivery system. I think I argue that we've played an indispensable role, really caring for some of the most challenging, complex, and difficult patients. And their stories are really heartbreaking, but every day miracles happen on our campus, and there really is reason for optimism and hope. Today, we're a 110-bed specialty hospital located in Brighton. I'd encourage you all to come visit us. About half of those beds are behavioral health. The other half, we're actually the only post-acute rehabilitation hospital for children in all of the Northeast, and we're very proud of that as well. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to kind of recap where we are and put this issue that we're dealing with in context. How many of you are parents out here? I'm a parent. I see most of us raising our hands. One of my heroes is John Kennedy, and his parents, as I said, were so instrumental in our founding. He said that children represented the world's most valuable resource and its best hope for the future, famously. And obviously was a big champion for some of the first legislation for children with disabilities and the Peace Corps and on and on. And as a parent, I ask the question when I come home every night, I ask the question, and you probably all ask this question, are the kids okay? How many people have asked that question? You come home, you ask your wife, how are the kids doing? I've got a 10-year-old and a 13-year-old. You ask how the kids are doing. So my first question is, are the kids okay? I think we've all heard today they are not okay, and we're really facing kind of an existential crisis around our children. Second is, are we doing enough about it? We are doing a lot, and it's so heartening to hear from all of our panelists and all of you around all the exciting things that are happening, but I'm going to argue we're not doing nearly enough, and I think you'll agree. But then finally, is hope on the horizon? And I look around this room, and I've sat here throughout the day, and in my front row seat at Franciscan Children's, I can tell you hope is on the horizon. First question, are the kids okay? The kids are emphatically not okay. Nearly half of kids report that they are persistently sad or hopeless or helpless. 2/3 of 14 to 18-year-olds experience stress throughout the day. And as we've seen, and as Dr. Samuel and others told us, mental health emergencies increased dramatically during the pandemic. So I think we can all agree that the kids are not okay. I would argue we're actually seeing a lost generation unfold before our very eyes, and I see it every day at Franciscan Children's. 1 in 5 children have depression or anxiety. That's 1 in 5 kids. I have a 10-year-old in 5th grade. 1 out of 5 kids in that classroom have depression or anxiety. Put that into context. There's about 15 million nationwide who have depression or anxiety. What does that mean? That's about the size of the population of all of New England. The population of Sweden. You go down the street to Fenway Park, 360 full capacity sellout crowds at Fenway Park. The numbers are staggering, and I'd argue this is not, we can't tolerate this. It's not sustainable, it's just not right. And we risk a lost generation before our eyes. And as you've heard today, suicide attempt has actually doubled during the pandemic. About 20% of all presentation to the emergency room is now suicide attempt. We operate an acute care unit. 95% of those children have had a suicide attempt or suicide ideation. And every time a child goes home, that bed is immediately and instantly filled, and we've got a very long wait list. In fact, for our outpatient program, there are about 300 kids that we know about that are on our wait list for our small outpatient program. Imagine that. So I'd argue that we're facing a generational crisis and that we will be measured when we look back. And I thought we heard some great answers from the panel just now. When we look back, how will we measure ourselves? I think we'll measure ourselves by what we did in this moment and our capacity to lead and did not accept the status quo. So then you ask the question, well, are we doing enough as a society? And certainly I'd celebrate everything that we're doing and all the exciting innovations I've heard from across the care delivery continuum, from our payer colleagues, our elected officials, our advocates. But the facts are the facts. The system is chronically, persistently, and tragically underfunded, despite the very good work that has happened recently through the pandemic, the roadmap, the recent legislation that was passed. You may not know this, but we spend 5 times more on pediatric AIDS from a research standpoint than we do for depression or suicide. The number of kids we lose to depression or suicide is 60 times the number of kids we lose to pediatric AIDS, HIV. HIV is a wonderful success story, but what are we doing now for the kids who really need it? There still are major, major inequalities and disparities in how we allocate funding. Second, you've heard today over and over again that the workforce is woefully inadequate and severely depleted. There are, you may not know this, about 1,000 open positions for mental health workers in the state of Massachusetts alone. Turnover rates in our hospitals are somewhere between 30 and 40% for mental health workers. There's about a 20 to 30% vacancy rate. And obviously the demand is skyrocketing. I learned that only 4% of behavioral health experts, like Dr. Samuel I see here, are actually pediatric or adolescent trained. So we really are behind the 8 ball on workforce. And I was very glad to hear some of the ideas and the urgency around the workforce issue. Third, the system is complex, it's fragmented, it's very difficult to navigate. And I was really moved by Pam, your story, and Tanisha, your story. This question of like, where do I even start? You know, every day I get a phone call because I'm the CEO of a behavioral health institution from a friend of a friend or someone who knows somebody, and they call me and they say, like, I didn't know who to call. And I'll tell you what, I'm a doctor and I lead this institution. My wife's a doctor. My son's had some challenges. I didn't know who to call. So the system is virtually impossible to navigate, and we've got to create a better system of care that is more seamless and much more family-centric and family that is much more easy to navigate and convenient. And And then finally, two things. Our infrastructure is aging and crumbling. If you've been to our site over at Warren Street in Brighton, it's a wonderful facility, but most of our buildings date back to 1949. And if you look around the country, most of the mental health infrastructure is just not built for purpose. And then finally, as we heard from Dr. Simon in such moving and eloquent ways, we have incredible disparities on equity that we really need to work through. So again, I would just argue we're just not doing enough, and we need to do more. And I'm trying to sound a call to action. So let me summarize what I heard is a handful of themes, and I'm sure there are more, but I heard 6 themes that actually were very uplifting to me. The first was around urgency, this idea that the time is now. It's not in 6 months, it's not in 12 months. It is now that we have to do more, and we have to act more boldly and more decisively. Second is this idea of reimagining care. We kind of throw that term around a lot. We talk a lot about it, but actually, I think there is something to be said for the idea that we need to improve access, but we also need to reimagine the care continuum so that it is more fit for purpose for what our children need. So it moves away from kind of crisis type of interventions and more upstream, as we've talked a lot about today, into the primary care office, into schools, into homes, to work more on prevention and promotion than crisis care. Third, there's this big idea around collaboration. And I think one of the beauties of this event is that it shows you the power of convening and collaboration. And as I'm going to talk about in a minute, our collaboration with and our affiliation with Boston Children's is a great evidence of coming together, because no one institution, no one entity can solve this issue. It will require all of us, whether you're a hospital system or a specialty provider like us, or a community provider or a school, it's going to require all of us to work together in new and innovative ways. Fourth, a lot of talk about workforce today, and I call it Workforce 3.0. Workforce 2.0, I think, was just kind of getting by during the pandemic. All of our staffs are burnt out. There's incredible turnover. There's frustration, anxiety, real profound issues. And I think we've tried to support our staffs through a very difficult 2 or 3 years, but now we really have to think about how do we expand the pipeline and how do we create the workforce of the future in a world where demand is going like this and our supply of healthcare workers and behavioral health workers in particular is down so much. We have to think about workforce in new and creative ways. We didn't talk much about it today, but I think accelerating research and innovation, somebody said we got to be nimble, and I agree with that completely. We have to act now to try to identify new therapies, new interventions, new ways to identify children to intervene before they show up at Franciscan Children's. And I know we can do that, and Boston Children's is doing some great work on that. We're doing some great work on that, but there's so much more to do. And then finally, I think while we celebrate all of the funding that has come through the pandemic and all of the recent legislation, I think we can all agree that the system is still woefully and tragically underfunded, and it's really going to require a step change, an infusion of dollars in ways that we can't imagine to try to address this crisis. Virtually every colleague I know in the field, the themes are all the same. We just don't have enough resources to throw at this problem, and we're starting at a point that is very, very low. So those are the big themes I heard, and I'm sure there were more. So I asked the question, are the kids okay? I think we said no, sadly. The second question, are we doing enough? No. But the third question, remember, was, is there hope on the horizon? Is there something to be optimistic about? And I think my first source of optimism and hope comes from looking around this room and just the power of people coming together and agreeing that this is a problem and agreeing to work together to try to solve it. But there's another example that I wanted to highlight, and it's not the only example, and it certainly won't, it's no silver bullet, it's no magic, there's no magic to this. But we're very proud of our affiliation, our pending affiliation with Boston Children's, and I credit Kevin Churchwell and others for the courage to come together and say, boy, you know, we're both trying to attack this issue, but there's so much more power in trying to do it together. If we do it together, we can attract more resource and investment, and we can really try to fundamentally change the trajectory of this crisis. We won't do it alone. We're going to do it with all of you. It's going to take a village of community leaders and partnerships, but I do think in coming together, we're bringing two fantastic organizations together to help address this issue. I will say that we share a common vision and values. We've worked together for a very long time and have a wonderful clinical partnership and relationship. And I think that we share this kind of urgency to do something bolder and to not accept the status quo and to really make investments. And so there's kind of four things that are sort of the premise or the basis for why we're affiliating. The first is to really expand access. The access challenge is so profound. As I said earlier, I've got about 300 kids on our wait list. Every time a bed opens, it's instantly filled. Kevin has 40 to 50 boarders in his emergency room every day. I checked the data today. There were, I think, 85 across the state. And so in coming together, we have an opportunity to expand access, but also to create a more seamless system of care that is easier to navigate for families and for children, that really put the children and their families at the center of this issue. The second is all around workforce. We're not going to solve the workforce problem, but I can tell you that in coming together, we'll be able to devote more resources to workforce, and on our campus, start to really build a workforce center of excellence to attract, recruit, retain, train, expand the workforce, and really try to think ahead to what do we need for the future. Both institutions spend lots of time with higher education and nursing schools, and we all recognize that we can't keep doing the same thing on workforce. We've got to find a way to attract young people into the field earlier, to create incentives for them to participate, create opportunities for them to come and rotate on our campuses, and to think of new and exciting ways to bring more people into the workforce. So that's second. Third, it goes without saying, Boston Children's is obviously one of the leading, if not the leading, research institution for pediatric health in general. But I think together we can do some very powerful and exciting things in terms of research and innovation. We have a small research program at Franciscan Children's, and our motto is all around translational research, trying things, iterating, measuring, trying things again. Because as the behavioral health experts will tell you, we don't have the tools that we need, and we need to continuously learn and continuously improve and continuously try new therapies and new approaches. And then finally, building a new center of excellence on our campus in Brighton. As I said, our campus dates back to the 1940s, and we have an opportunity to really build something, I think, special for the community, that is a community asset that says to these kids and these families who are dealing with the most unimaginable tragedy and challenge, that says that we as a society are dedicating ourselves to you, that we are investing in you, and that we care about you. And this center of excellence that we want to build will house the next generation of workforce, will house our research, our collective research programs, and it importantly will expand our capacity so that we can take care of these so many kids who desperately need it. So with that, let me close by saying thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I very much appreciate to be part of this community with you, and my hope is, and I hope you share this, that this won't be the last time we talk, that we won't talk every 2 years and give speeches, but we'll actually create a community of stakeholders here who can get together to collaborate and coordinate and address this issue, which again, I believe is one of the central, if not the central issue of our time. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank everybody here. You are released.